9.2 million Americans. That's how many people are right now in default on a federal student loan. And starting May 5th of this year, after a 6-year pause, the United States Treasury can take 15% of their paycheck without ever going to court.
Wait, 15%? Without a hearing? Without a judge? Without anything?
Without anything. The Department of Education sends a letter, and your employer is legally required to comply. And here's the kicker, Avery. That's just the wages. Treasury can also seize your tax refund, garnish part of your Social Security check, and intercept your earned income tax credit and your child tax credit.
Social Security? You can lose part of your retirement check over a student loan from 1998?
Yes, there's no statute of limitations on federal student loan collection. None.
Okay, so today we're talking about the student loan garnishment wave. 9.2 million Americans staring down the loss of 15% of their pay. A repayment system that just got completely rewritten. And a borrower portfolio worth $1.7 trillion that the Treasury Department is now taking over directly from the Department of Education.
It's the biggest change to the federal student loan system in 25 years.
But before we go forward, we have to go back, because the story of how we ended up here starts with a beach ball-sized satellite, an Alabama senator, and the Cold War. Let's get into it.
October 4th, 1957. The Soviet Union launches Sputnik, the first artificial satellite in human history. It's about the size of a beach ball, weighs 184 pounds, and it orbits the Earth every 90 minutes. Beeping.
Just beeping.
Just beeping. But that beep terrified Washington. If the Soviets could put a satellite into space, they could put a nuclear weapon there too. The very next day, in the United States Senate, a clerk named Stuart McClure walks into the office of his boss, Lister Hill, Democratic senator from Alabama, and he says, "Senator, we've been trying to pass federal education funding for years. The House keeps killing it. What if we called it a defense bill?"
So student loans were marketed as a national security measure?
Exactly. They renamed it the National Defense Education Act, and on September 2nd, 1958, President Eisenhower signed it into law. $1 billion in federal funding, and for the first time in American history, the federal government was directly making loans to college students.
What was the original idea? Like, who were these loans for?
Quote, promising yet needy students, end quote. Especially students in math, science, engineering, and foreign languages. The whole point was to win the Cold War by educating better engineers and scientists than the Russians.
So this started as a STEM scholarship that happened to be a loan.
That's exactly right. And it worked. In 1960, there were 3.6 million students in college. By 1970, 7.5 million. The student loan program more than doubled American higher education in a single decade.
Okay, so that's the origin. National defense, Cold War, win the space race. When does it become what it is today?
Slowly, over 4 key moments. 1965. President Johnson signs the Higher Education Act, which expands lending way beyond STEM students. 1976. Congress passes the first restriction on bankruptcy. You could no longer discharge a student loan in bankruptcy in the first 5 years unless you proved undue hardship.
Why did they do that?
There was a panic, mostly anecdotal, that newly minted doctors and lawyers were filing bankruptcy, walking away from their loans, and going off to start lucrative careers debt-free. A General Accounting Office study at the time found less than 1% of student loans were being discharged in bankruptcy.
So Congress passed a sweeping restriction based on a story that wasn't really true.
Welcome to financial regulation. In 1990, they extended that protection from 5 years to 7. And then, in 1998, came the moment that changed everything. The Higher Education Amendments of 1998 eliminated the temporal discharge entirely. From that point forward, federal student loans could only be discharged in bankruptcy by proving undue hardship, a standard that was never defined in the law and which the courts have made nearly impossible to meet.
So in 1998, Congress made student debt the only consumer debt in America that follows you to your grave.
Almost. 2005 completed the project. The Bankruptcy Abuse Prevention and Consumer Protection Act extended the same impossible standard to private student loans, too. So now we have a category of debt, over $1.5 trillion of it, that you cannot escape through bankruptcy, that has no statute of limitations, and that the federal government can collect from you without ever going to court.
No other consumer debt works like this. Credit cards? Bankruptcy. Medical debt? Bankruptcy. Mortgage? Foreclosure and walk away. Student loans? They follow you for life.
For life. The federal government can garnish your Social Security at age 75 for a loan you took out at age 18.
Okay, so bring us to today. Where do the numbers stand right now?
$1.84 trillion in total student loan debt. 42.8 million federal borrowers. Average federal balance, $39,633. Record high.
And how many are in default?
As of March, 9.2 million in default, another 2.4 million in late-stage delinquency. By summer, the Department of Education has projected up to 13 million borrowers could be in default. That's roughly 1 in 4 federal student loan borrowers.
1 in 4. So this isn't a fringe problem.
Half of student loan borrowers are over 30. A quarter are over 45. The 35 to 49 age group alone holds $681 billion in federal debt. And here's the one that surprised me. Americans aged 62 and older still owe $140 billion in student loans.
People in their 70s are paying student loans?
Some are paying them out of their Social Security checks.
So what triggered this default surge? Loans were paused for years.
That's the story. March 2020, the first Trump administration paused federal student loan payments because of COVID. Interest stopped accruing. Collections stopped. The pause kept getting extended through Trump's first term and through the Biden administration until October 2023, when payments finally resumed. But for many borrowers, life had changed. They'd moved. They'd lost track of who serviced their loan. The SAVE plan, which was supposed to make payments affordable, got tied up in court. And on March 10th of this year, a federal court ended SAVE entirely. 7.5 million borrowers got moved out of it.
So millions of people thought they were on a payment plan, and now they're not.
And many didn't realize they'd fallen into default until the letter showed up.
Okay, walk me through what's happening right now. What changed in 2026?
3 big things. 1. The Trump administration announced wage garnishment would resume the week of January 7th. About 1,000 notices went out. Then, on January 16th, just 9 days later, they paused all involuntary collections. They cited the Working Families Tax Cuts Act and said they wanted to give borrowers more options.
They turned it on and then off.
They turned it on, then off. But the pause is temporary. Treasury announced collections will resume May 5th. May 5th.
That's 8 days from now.
8 days. 2. March 19th, the Education Department and the Treasury Department signed an interagency agreement transferring operational management of the entire $1.7 trillion federal student loan portfolio from education to Treasury. Treasury now runs collections. Treasury runs default resolution. Treasury, eventually, will run servicing.
So the IRS is essentially in charge of student loans now.
Treasury's Bureau of the Fiscal Service, same family. The Education Department keeps the policy authority, but Treasury runs the operation. And 3. On July 1st, all the old repayment plans start to phase out. SAVE is dead. PAYE and ICR sunset by 2028. New borrowers will have only 2 choices: a tiered standard plan and a new income-driven plan called the Repayment Assistance Plan, or RAP.
Quickly, what's RAP?
Payments are 1 to 10% of your adjusted gross income, minimum $10 a month if you make under $10,000 a year. Forgiveness after 30 years. The one genuinely good feature: if your monthly payment doesn't cover all the accrued interest, the government waives the difference, so your balance can't grow while you're paying.
That actually sounds reasonable. Wait, but if I have older loans, what happens to me?
If your loans were dispersed before July 1st, 2026, you keep access to IBR, income-based repayment, which is a slightly older and, in some cases, more generous IDR plan. PAYE and ICR borrowers can stay where they are until July 2028. Then they get moved automatically.
All right, let me play devil's advocate for a minute, because I think there are reasonable arguments on both sides here.
Please.
The administration's position, and the position of a lot of taxpayers, is, look, you signed the loan, you got the education, you promised to pay it back. The taxpayer shouldn't be on the hook for your degree. 45 million Americans never went to college, and many of them are being asked to subsidize forgiveness for people who did. Is that fair?
It's a serious argument, and it's true that under the law, these are valid contracts. The department's framing is, quote, if you take out a loan, you must pay it back, end quote. From a budget perspective, the SAVE plan alone was estimated to cost $342 billion over 10 years.
That's real money.
That's real money. The other side of it, though, the borrower advocacy side, is that this isn't really a credit market. It's an administered program. The government sets the price. The government extends the credit. The government took the bankruptcy escape hatch away. And college costs have risen 400% above inflation since 1978. A degree that cost $3,000 in 1978 costs about $36,000 today. Wages haven't kept up.
So both things are true at once. The borrower took the loan, but the system was rigged from the start.
That's the honest framing. And almost everyone, left, right, and center, agrees the current system is broken. They just don't agree on whether the answer is more forgiveness, fewer loans, cheaper college, or harsher collection.
That's why a quarter of borrowers are in default. Okay, the wealth moves. What does someone in default, or someone worried about falling into default, do right now?
5 concrete moves. Let's go. Move 1. Find out where you actually stand. Today, log in to studentaid.gov. Look at the dashboard. If you see a red box that says you're in default, you're in default. If you don't know who your servicer is, the site will tell you. You cannot fix what you don't see.
And there's a second site too, right? For defaulted borrowers specifically?
mydebt.gov. Note, .ed.gov, not .com. .com is a phishing site. This is where you'll handle a default.
Got it. Move 2?
Move 2. If you're in default, call before May 5th. The default resolution group number is 1-800-621-3115. The Treasury offset hotline is 1-800-304-3107. Either rehabilitate or consolidate. Rehabilitation is 9 on-time payments over 10 months, and it removes the default from your credit report. Consolidation takes about 6 to 8 weeks and gets you back into good standing immediately, but the default stays on your record. And under the new law, you actually get a second rehabilitation chance. The old law allowed only 1 in your lifetime.
That's a meaningful change.
It's a real lifeline. Move 3. If you receive a garnishment notice, you have 30 days. Use them. You can request a hearing on financial hardship grounds. You can ask to reduce the amount taken. You can negotiate a repayment plan that stops the garnishment before it starts. 30 days, not 31. Don't sit on it.
Move 4?
Move 4. If you're not in default but you're stretched thin, get on the right repayment plan now. Today, before the system gets overwhelmed in July. Apply at studentaid.gov/IDR. There's a checkbox that says, "Place me on the plan with the lowest monthly payment." Use it. The servicer picks the most generous available IDR plan for you, usually IBR if your loans qualify. And remember, if your income is 0, your IDR payment can be 0, and that 0 still counts toward forgiveness.
A $0 payment counting toward forgiveness. That surprises people.
It surprises everyone. Use it. Move 5, and this is the big one for everyone listening, in default or not. Never sacrifice retirement to pay down student debt faster than required.
Wait, even with the threat of Social Security garnishment in your future?
Especially because of that. Here's the math. The federal employer match in your 401k is an instant 100% return on your money. You will not get that anywhere else, ever. If you skip the match to throw an extra $200 at a 6% student loan, you've just turned down a 100% return to chase a 6% return. That math never works.
Pay the minimum on the loan, get the match, build the buffer. Episode 11 all over again.
Episode 11 all over again. The student loan crisis is real. So is the retirement crisis. Don't fix one by deepening the other. 68 years ago this fall, a beeping satellite scared a country into investing in its young people. The bill Eisenhower signed in 1958 was called the National Defense Education Act because Congress understood, at that moment, that an educated population was a national asset worth funding. Somewhere between 1958 and today, we stopped treating it as an investment and started treating it as a transaction. We told 18-year-olds it was the path to the middle class. Then we removed every consumer protection that exists in any other corner of the credit market. No bankruptcy, no statute of limitations, no court hearing before garnishment. And now, in 2026, we're going to take 15% of their paychecks until the debt is paid, or until they die. You don't have to like this system to survive it. The history of student debt is really the history of how a Cold War scholarship program became the only debt in America you can't escape. Knowing that, knowing exactly what you're up against, is the first wealth move. Everything else follows from there.
Preparing without predicting, always. That's Trek4Wealth. Keep trekking,